long career, that's one way of putting it. I wonder how many of you employed people? Have anybody interviewed? Yeah, a few. And if you think of when you applied for a job yourself, I think if I was applying for a job with you and you saw my CV, you may well put me straight in the discard pile because I can't hold down a job. Since ordination, I've had 7 different paid posts and 4 voluntary ones. Before ordination, I had 5 jobs or voluntary positions in just over 2 years. In 42 years of marriage, Jan and I have had 11 married homes. We hope we won't be moving again, but one never knows. So my career path seems more than a bit scattered, but it is actually amazingly connected, because each, I believe, builds on the previous one, completely and utterly guided by God at every stage. I was originally going to title my talk Called to Ministry in the Mission and the Media, which are the main areas that I've worked in. But it seemed right to use Proverbs 3, 5 and 6, well-known verses, as a starting point. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, lean not on thine own understanding. Yes, I am that old. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct thy paths. That was given to me when I was 13 on my confirmation. But I rather like the Good News version. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, never rely on what you think you know. I like that one. And God will show you the right way. It's been proved time and time again. When you're a vicar, most people seem to assume you come from a long line of vicars, or at least a very religious family. That's not the case. I'm not aware of any Christian faith in my family at all in previous generations. It just wasn't part of our life. If anything, there was a slight negativity towards church. A school friend, Simon, invited me to Sunday school when I was 10, and that was it. It made sense. Jesus became very real to me. And I wasn't the only one at that age. It was quite a large Sunday school. So when we got beyond that age, they started a junior youth group, then a more senior one, with a succession of delightful and committed youth leaders who opened their homes to us. And quite a number of us have gone on to clergy or lay positions in the church. I also joined the local Crusader class. Any Crusaders here? No? Gosh! Okay, that's it. But Crusaders is now called Urban Saints, but Bible-based youth work. And so that strengthened my love for the Bible, the stories that got at work in people's lives. And also in Crusaders, I discovered another group of Christians who were prepared to give generously of their time and their resources to us as young people. So more and more involved at church, I moved from handing out the hymn books to a church council member at 17, which is a little unusual. And our vicar was very wise. He put 2 of us on the council because one would have been completely overawed. He was a past Crusader himself. He brought the first evangelical ministry to our parish church, which had been fairly middle of the road, and was absolutely brilliant in encouraging young people, investing in people, taking risks with them. And that's influenced me. He got the youth group planning and leading one evening service a month, from prayer book to the youth. Leading prayers, creating dramas. At 16, I was asked to preach. This was the exciting liturgical experimental times of the 70s. This was great. Looking back, that seemed quite a stretch for me and a huge risk for the vicar. But at the time, it seemed natural. Never rely on what you think you know. You just do it because it feels that's what you're called to do, what God wanted us. So by the time I set off as a student, having done sort of scientific A-levels, I went off to embark on my degree in archaeology. Strong Christian, becoming a leader already in church life, but I'd never thought of becoming a vicar. And as university approached, my trust in God was tested in a big way. My father died suddenly from an embolism the March before I was to take my A-levels. It must have done something to my faith, but because of the support I had from the church, it didn't knock my faith. I didn't question God, but I did have a great support. So faith was important. Through university, I continued my growth in faith, Christian Union, St Nick's Church under George Carey, and College Chapel, which I attended every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. as a student. It's That's not bad, is it? I'm not trying to clock up brownie points, but that was just natural, because it just felt right. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get all that sort of connection. So trust in God, tested once when my father died. Second time, I thought I was all sorted out. I was doing quite well at the degree. I thought I'd end up in museum work, sort of museum creation. Applied for a course, didn't get in. For the first time in my life, I was facing it hadn't worked. And that was a shock. So that was early in the spring term. Said my finals were coming up. I believed God had a plan, but I had to wait. Waiting isn't always easy, is it? Not at all. So I waited, and obviously I had my revision to do. About 3 months. 3 weeks before my final exams, God gave me my next step in a very dramatic way. As I prayed about a job application, I'll come back to that in a moment, but I heard God calling me, a literal audible voice. I want you as a vicar. It was as simple as that. And I had a vision. You know those World War II pillboxes that have slits on about sort of 6 sides? It was as if I was standing in the middle of that, and I was looking back on my life. Okay, I was only sort of 20 at the time, but I was looking back at my life, and all the paths seemed to link up to where I was at that moment. So, never thought of it before, but from that point I was absolutely certain that that was what God wanted. Bit of a handbrake turn, if you like, God had done. Never rely on what you think you know. God might have something else for you. So I got some experience a couple of years out, went to train at Ridley Hall in Cambridge, and archaeology, which people were a bit disappointed I wasn't carrying on with that, but it was a fantastic training for theology. And indeed writing essays, because I said I was a scientific A-levels. I didn't know how to write an essay at that point, but it had trained me. But it also meant I could explore biblical archaeology, which has been a great asset to my ministry. God always uses, I believe, our gifts and experience, but not always in the way that we think he's going to use us. Then, next decision point, where to go as a curate? Well, I spent a year in Everton at a sort of church community centre there, the year of the Toxteth riots, 1881. Interesting year to be in Liverpool, that was. So I was convinced I wanted to go north and urban, because I'm from the deep south. I applied to a brilliant parish on the Wirral, one of the toughest estates in the UK. On paper it looked great, and we went there and ticked lots of boxes. But when Jan and I returned, something didn't feel right about that. We just didn't feel that God wanted us there for whatever reason. So a bit disconsolate, we shared this with my college principal, who suggested another parish, which was in the north, Hull, on the east coast. We didn't really want to go back to the east coast, having been in Cambridge. It had some outer urban, but after this was a church in a village I would have actually been based in. So somewhat reluctantly, being a man under authority and all that, we went. You can probably guess what happened. That one felt as right as the other one hadn't. And amongst all the other experiences, the week after I arrived, I made a connection with BBC Radio Humberside and volunteered as a volunteer interviewer, which was really significant. Within a week of starting my ordained ministry, I'd also made a connection with the media. So the end of curacy came. We were looking for the next move. Parish experience was so full. It was a really big parish, lots going on, that although most people went on for a second curacy at that time, we thought, no, I wanted something more specialised, maybe including a bit of radio. The local bishop had pretty much promised me a job as the university chaplain, but the best laid plans and all that, even of bishops, I won't comment any further on that. That maybe has a different connotation now than when I wrote it, but anyway. But once again, it was, well, where now? Something that had absolutely seemed, that was what I should be doing. It had stopped, pointing in one direction then. I shouldn't say don't plan, because, never use your rational mind, never weigh things up. I'm not saying that at all, far from it. For those who are into Myers-Briggs, I'm an ISTJ. If you know what that is, that's great. If you don't worry about it. But it means my personality type is all about facts, all about input, all about logic. For those who've done Belbin team roles, one of my key strengths is resource investigator. Another one is plant. I'm an ideas person. I love finding information. Yet over the years, alongside all those facts, God has shown me very clearly not to ignore my feelings. Because when I was young, facts, faith, feelings, you might remember that feelings were shunted off. You weren't supposed to follow feelings. Absolutely not. Really, really important. Because sometimes to get the best out of you, God nudges you out of your comfort zones. Indeed, occasionally uses a bit more directness than nudge, but anyway. But where does God want you? Where does God want you for his mission? And somebody sent me an advert for a religious program advisor, it described it, in local commercial radio, which I applied for and got. Brilliant, brilliant job. Most clergy would run a mile from that kind of thing, but I loved it. Plenty to push me outside my comfort zone. I'd never actually done any live broadcasting when I got that job, which was an issue, but they trained me on it. But God has clearly a sense of humour, because as I was applying for a job, I was thinking of applying for a job in the media when God called me to ordination. Interesting disconnection there. Trust in the Lord, never rely on what you think you know. So 5 years later, again, a lot of my jobs were about 5 years. Thoroughly enjoying the job, made a lot of useful contacts, which is really useful in the media, radio and television. I was well set for a career in the BBC, but it didn't feel right. So this poacher turned gamekeeper, and I went to Lancashire as the Church of England's press and media officer. That was an exciting time in itself, and lots more I could say about that. But during this time, I got involved in this strange new thing called the World Wide Web. It was new. It was new. And through a connection through a local college, I ended up becoming the Church of England spokesperson for this. I started, literally we set up as a group of communication officers, a working party, and that led to the Church of England's first officer on the web. So really, really interesting. Because some of us could see what this was going to be. Others think it was just a passing fad. But so that was an exciting thing. But that was the next step. God put me into another area that I had no experience of. The fact the church was ahead of the game was a fantastic news story. Really, really interesting. God was using me and enabling me to use the media to get his message out in the world. A little aside, I know somebody else I knew, he said, look, when I preach to somebody, a church, 50, 60 people, when I speak on local radio, I get so much more contacts. I was preaching, it wasn't preaching, it was a different thing, 60 to 70,000 people every Sunday morning. And I know some of them I did influence because some of them contacted me for various ways. So in another 5 years, the web was the thing that got me my next job, really. I was appointed communication director to the Church Mission Society, the main Anglican mission agency. So there I was helping tell the story of God's mission around the world, which is exciting, mission and media being linked. My ending at CMS was an interesting one. Under a new General Secretary, my post was made redundant. There's not many clergy who can say they've been made redundant in their lives. Never a good time to be made redundant, but this was the time our two sons, one was just about to go to university, one was just about to start A-levels. We were in our own home at that point with a mortgage that needed paying. What to do, where to look. Again, I had 6 months. I finished the job in, I think it was February of the year. And again, nothing to go to. I'd applied for a few other jobs, didn't get anything. So local, and I thought, well, maybe this is the time to go back into parish. That was, because I've always felt my medium and ministry should be linked in some way to the local church. So looking locally made most sense, looking around Guildford area because of our children's situation. We started looking, and I'm quite good at coming second at job interviews. Anyway, that's what happened with the parish that was looking a good possibility. So after that, we said, well, okay, God, we'll go anywhere in the country, apart from London and maybe the southwest, but pretty much anywhere. Anyway, preferably in the north. 3 interviews in 1 week: Cheshire, Huddersfield, and Carlisle. I never got to Carlisle because the Huddersfield one felt right. And that was interesting with the media. As far as the people of Huddersfield were concerned, there were only 2 vicars in the town. My colleague at the parish church and me in this village on the edge, because we were the 2 clergy who regularly appeared in the local newspaper. So many times, so many stories. And on local radio as well, for that matter. We had the visibility, and it sounds on behalf of the whole wider church. So, that was a gift. If God gives you a gift, use it. You're not pushing yourself forward. It's something that God wants you to do. 2 stories from that time which stand out. One, if you have Googled me, you may have done that, but if you do, the top 6 hits on the first page are likely to be the most famous story I had at my parish. Now, some people have, there we are. I enacted my own version of the Parable of the Talents. I gave some money away, about £600 in the end, of my own money, which was one of the things the media were interested in. But I ended up on papers and TV literally around the world. A business program in America, and he sent me a tenner as well, which was quite fun. So that was one story. The other story was a more serious one. We offered our old church-built school building as a night shelter for asylum seekers. So we thought this was a good Christian thing to do. And I politely informed the immediate neighbours that we would have this group moving in. Yeah, you might imagine, I had a few interesting conversations, but as matters built up over the next few weeks, we decided we had to call a public meeting. We had the police outside in a van because the English Defence League were there. They come to support the anti-faction. And I got this all planned out. I wasn't going to say anything, or very little. It was being chaired by a local politician. But he began to lose control of the meeting. And so as I was praying, you imagine very hard there, God gave me some words to say. And without any previous thought about what else I was going to say at that, I said, well, I'm going to withdraw that idea. There's no way I bring these people in here. But how about if we offer to host people in our own homes? And everybody went, oh, they couldn't say anything about that. So, complete silence. And as people left the meeting, the group of us in the church prayed, and there was an amazing sense of God's peace. Trust in God. Trust in God. And in the many weeks and days following that, so many people in the local community came to me horrified by the aggressive response there'd been, saying we're really so ashamed of being part of this community. And it became a huge step in the presence of witness of the church. And we were no longer there just for the nice thing. We were prepared with a head above the parapet. We were stepping up to meet a need. God did amazing things through that. Again, because of the kind of person I am, after a while it began to feel, well, maybe we should move on. A couple of years applying for the kind of jobs I've been advised by a bishop again, not getting any of them, I moved to Lincolnshire as what was described as mission team leader to support mission across the county. In charge of a team, youth work, fundraising, stewardship as it's called, fundraising, pioneering, emerging church, that kind of thing was all part of it. Anyway, 5 years later, and Lincolnshire is a very rural county, not easy to self-change to somewhere like that. They decided they needed a different direction. Money wasn't coming in. We were £3 million every year in deficit in Lincolnshire. So they had to start cutting some posts. And guess which one of those was? So the second time, faced redundancy. And this time, decision about both Jan and my wife's parents. They were needing care. And again, we had a mortgage that needed paying at that point. We were out of church property. So I became what's called an interim minister. What had been the second largest evangelical church in the county, it had undergone a lot of trauma, lost about 3/4 of its members, and also had gone through COVID. So I was called to that church to help build it up. And so I had a fantastic 20 months there doing just that, helping them catch a new vision of what God might do in them and through them. And at that point, I retired and we moved here. That's another story of God's guidance as well, and things working very differently to what we thought. We thought we were going to be in Durham, but family moved here and various other things. So things changed again. And even since I've been here, things haven't worked out quite as we thought. I've been watching watch a bit of TV, and when you retire, or you're on TV dramas, what are you supposed to do? It's usually fishing, gardening, buying a boat, I think, are the top three. That's what you're supposed to. Sorry? Cooking, yeah, maybe cooking as well. Doing something that's not...
Cruising as well.
Oh, cruising, yeah, that was never in my thinking, but that's not what God has for us, has it? Has he? At all. God has new things for us at whatever stage of life we are. So the motto verse for my Lincoln church that I finished my ministry in, another verse, Philippians 4:6, and the New Living Translation says, "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything," which I think fits pretty well with Proverbs 3. And I'm going to finish it there, and I'm very happy to answer questions for people. But I think that's probably enough to give you a sort of idea of the way that God's taken me through my ministry.
Richard, thank you.
Thank you.